Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 22nd and tonight's movie is As Above, So Below. Okay, a few things about this movie. First of all, there was only one occasion this entire month where two movies were directed by the same person, and that is this and the Poughkeepsie tapes from a few days ago, and they were both directed by John Eric Dowdle? I don't know. And that was completely unintentional. I didn't really look at the directors for either of these. I looked it up, and he also directed Quarantine, which I thought was okay, but definitely inferior to Wreck. But anyway, I was aware of this movie when it was first being released, and I wanted to check it out, but then I saw that it got a really bad Rotten Tomatoes rating, and because the critics on Rotten Tomatoes are the objective end-all be-all for how good a movie is, I decided to not watch it. But I said a few days ago in my searching video that I was looking up the highest rated found footage movies on IMDb, and I believe this was in the top 10. That made me think that maybe this movie was worth a look after all. As Above, So Below has a really good foundation because if there is any location in the world that would be perfect as the setting for a horror movie, it would be the Paris catacombs. It's apparently a group of people going down into the catacombs with camera equipment and they're trying to find something. Apparently there was a secret chamber that they're trying to get into by going through the catacombs, but they get lost. And from what I can tell, the catacombs or something in the catacombs starts messing with them. It starts to bring up things from their past that they either are nostalgic about or they're guilty about and uses that to mess with them. And there's an implication that they enter into hell. This is a found footage movie I've known about for a while, so it's going to be interesting to finally watch it and see what it's like. The Poughkeepsie tapes was done very well, so now I'm a little bit more optimistic about the quality of this movie. But the only way to know is to find out, which I'm going to go do now. As Above, So Below was very interesting. I think I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. Though I will say, I think this might be the most ambitious found footage movie I've ever seen. Not in terms of editing or scares, but just in terms of the fact that this is trying to do so much. The Poughkeepsie tapes, for comparison, all it was trying to do was being scary, and it did that very well. But As Above, So Below, in addition to being scary, also wants to have really good characters, a really good story, be a really fun adventure movie in addition to being a horror movie. This has such high ambitions. And while it does work for the most part, I think it just tried to do a little bit too much, especially given what its runtime is. If this movie was longer, I think that they could have pulled off everything that they set out to do, but given the way it is, it's not quite there. The first act of this movie was basically like National Treasure. It was like Lara Croft looking through history, and they're trying to find the Philosopher's Stone. The alchemic stone from Nicholas Flamel that can turn lead into gold and grant eternal life. The main character of this movie is Scarlett, who is this very cerebral Lara Croft type of treasure hunter, and she does not have much respect for laws or rules because she's like, oh yeah, let's just trespass. Oh yeah, let's just break this. Let's just mess with this priceless historical artifact because this will all help me find the Philosopher's Stone. There's also the cameraman, Benji, who I think started to document all this. Scarlett's friend Josh, who I think is doing similar things with treasure hunting. He can translate old languages. And we also have the three people from France who are guiding them down into the catacombs and the ones that kind of know the way around them. Their names are Papillon, Suixi, and Zed. As Above, So Below is interesting because the first part of it does not feel like a horror movie at all. It feels like an action-adventure movie, in the vein of National Treasure or something like that. But then the horror part of the movie starts when they go down into the catacombs, and I'll say it again, the catacombs of Paris are the perfect place for a horror movie, because they're old, they're spooky, they're dark, most people don't know that much about them. I'm surprised there aren't more horror movies about the catacombs of Paris. And overall, I would say that they use the location very well. One thing that became very clear to me as this movie was going is that this is one of the few times where the fact that it's found footage was, I think, purely a stylistic choice, sort of like how it was in Cloverfield. In fact, I'm pretty sure this would be a lot easier to be made as a third-person horror movie. But to its credit, they do make it so that it's not completely pointless that they're recording everything, because they're using the camera's light to see, which I've seen used in a few other movies. They also have lights and little cameras on these little headlamps that three of the characters are wearing, so that allows for different shots and different angles. There were some really clever ideas in this movie. Besides, things from people's past coming up in very strange ways, there was also one scene that I really liked where one of the characters, stumbled into, a puddle of water, or it was, a pool of water on the ground, and suddenly the entire audio sounded like it was underwater. And it didn't really make sense because nobody was underwater and there was no cameras underwater. And I've said this before, with found footage movies, if you hear something on the video, it's that thing is actually there. So all the other characters looked confused and they were like, do you hear that? I can't hear anything. There's a lot of little touches like that that contribute to the really trippy nature of this movie. The entire thing is just hammering home the fact that the characters are not the ones in control. It's whatever's in this labyrinth that's doing this. Still, I feel like this movie would have fared better if they either went full adventure movie or full horror movie, or if they had just made the movie longer to try to fully accommodate both of them. Because The Conjuring 2 managed to accommodate both of those ideas in one movie, and it was a little bit longer than this one was. While it was good overall, it had the potential to be like The Conjuring 2 or Searching level good, and it didn't really get there. But even despite that, this was a really good found footage horror movie. Now I want to talk about a few spoilers. One thing that I do appreciate about this movie is that that when they were trying to get the three French people to help them out, they didn't say, oh, we're looking for a Philosopher's Stone. They were talking about we're looking for treasure in the hidden room, which is also true, but it was also a lot more believable. And I do like how in this movie, when things start going wrong, they don't actually have the option of just leaving. Because if they had the option of just leaving and didn't, that would have been a problem. But what they were doing is that they were going a certain way and the cave behind them collapsed. And they conclude that the only way out would be to go through the treasure room because the treasure room connects two separate parts of the catacombs together. So it's actually about halfway through the movie that they make it to the treasure room, the place where the Philosopher's Stone is. That's not something they wait until the very end, because even when they get there, they still have the problem of how are they going to get out. And the way that it works is that the only way to leave is to go even deeper into the catacombs where things are even scarier and even more dangerous. They seem to be going into a place that's a copy of the rooms they were already in. Past the treasure room, there's this tunnel, and then they come out and there's another treasure room, but it's the mirror image. Except it doesn't go backwards in the way that down is up. They still have to go even further down to keep going. And that's where more of the psychological horror creeps in, because there are a lot of things that come up that are from these characters' past that they feel really guilty about. There was also a few callbacks that I liked, because way at the beginning of the movie, the person who led them to Papillon and his friends was this guy down in the catacombs, and he told them about it, and then they looked at the tour guide, and they looked back, and he was gone. And later, Papillon sees a burning car with that exact same guy in it. And this is where I can sort of understand when the critics say that this movie was kind of cliched, because you discover that the people who are dying are the ones that don't accept responsibility or face their fears, because Papillon keeps saying, it wasn't my fault, and he gets sucked in by the car and dies. And by that point, there are only 3 people left alive, Zed, Josh, and Scarlett. And all 3 of them, accept their demons and what they're guilty about. There was a point where Scarlett is so intent on finding this because her dad killed himself in the search of this. And she was really guilty because apparently he called her and she didn't pick up on the night where he hung himself. But she, comes to terms with it and I guess forgives herself for it, or, fully, acknowledges that she messed up. And basically that leads to the remaining 3 characters taking a leap of faith into a bottomless pit. And this answers one of the questions that I had for the entire movie, which is how did anybody find this footage? Because from the beginning, I was working on the assumption that every single one of them was going to die. But in a twist, when they get after that bottomless pit jump thing, the 3 remaining characters, they see a manhole. And this was a really good effect. It was very impressive the way that they did this. Most of the effects in this movie are really good, but this I think was my favorite. They discovered that they need to push down on the manhole, which would mean pushing it up, because it's like a portal into normal Paris, and go upside down becomes right side up. And 3 of the characters actually make it out of the catacombs alive. I do appreciate As Above, So Below for what it did with its horror and its adventure elements, but I really feel like this movie could have been so much more. And I think that mostly just comes from the fact that it has a relatively short runtime, so it felt like they were trying to cram too much too fast into the length of time that they had. I think that this movie would have been a lot better if they'd given themselves more time to develop all the things they needed to develop, or they'd spend most of their time developing either the action-adventure side of it or the horror side of it. But that didn't mean that it wasn't still good. Alright, I'll see you guys tomorrow.